Hello, and welcome to the Hodges Heroes Making the Most of Our Mess podcast. We got a really deep subject today, so hang with us. My name is Doug. This is Janan. Janan, tell us a little bit about what we're going to be talking about today.
So, in recent years, our family's experienced some loss, some death, some illnesses, and being able to explain this in a proper way to someone with special needs can be very challenging because it needs to be very direct and black and white. But, Doug, I know you have personal experience in a previous profession being a hospice chaplain in South Florida. So, you can also professionally speak to a lot of this.
Yeah, I'm a member of all of the clubs that nobody wants to be a part of. Some of the stuff we're going to be talking about today it can be helpful for those that are on the spectrum, but can also be helpful for those that are not on the spectrum. For instance, metaphorical language. We want to try to avoid that when we're talking about things like death and dying and diseases and those sort of things. Because if we try to soften the blow of something that's going to already be really difficult to hear, we don't that part of our brain that processes all of that formal thought stuff is just going to go offline pretty quick, and we're not going to know what you're talking about. So saying things like your loved one has passed, your loved one is no longer with us, they're in a better place,
Right.
those are going to receive questions of like, so they got transferred to another hospital,
Right.
there's a test they had to go through, what they passed it, what do you mean they're no longer with you, like all those kind of things
Right.
don't make sense. So what sounds like really harsh and really mean to be able to say your loved one has died, that sounds like, wow, I can't just come out and say it like that. It's gonna hurt somebody's feelings. Well, no matter how you say it, it's gonna hurt somebody's feelings.
Correct.
But to be able to give them the courtesy of being direct and upfront and honest and giving them some time and space to process it, I've just found from my personal experience that tends to be best.
And particularly when providing this information to someone who has some type of struggles, you're going to have to repeat it over and over and over again. And one thing from our experience with our son who has autism, among the other things, is with autism comes perseveration on different subject areas. And it can be very challenging because not only are, maybe we are grieving, but now our child who has his struggles and is trying to process it and process it out loud and talking to everybody about it, it makes it very complicated because everyone's grieving and some people don't want to talk about it, but yet we have to talk about it because he has to talk about it to understand it. So it's very, very complicated.
And one of the mistakes that a lot of times families can get into is, especially as parents, to not grieve in front of their children. It's kind of like, well, I have to keep it strong. I have to not grieve. I have to show them.
Don't cry.
But no, that your kids need to see you grieving because they need a model for what that looks like.
Yeah.
And seeing you cry, seeing you be upset, seeing you be sad, when you're angry in the process of grief, explain to them, hey, I'm angry today. What are you angry at? I'm just angry because my loved one passed away or they died. And,
right. Or even things like, hey, Dad needs a break. Dad is sad. He needs to be left alone. He needs to have rest in his room. He needs to go somewhere, or Mom needs to go somewhere, because if you've ever been through tragedy or loss or illness or a bad diagnosis, it takes people time to process, and people process emotions in different ways.
And I will tell you that that's been a challenge for us as a couple because in order for me to give Janan time to grieve, it means I have to take a kid and go somewhere and keep them occupied.
Right.
Which means I can't be with Janan as she's processing through her grief, and vice versa for her. She takes the kids when I'm going through stuff that I need more time. And we're both grieving. We're both had a loss that we're working through. But in our particular situation, it was my mom that passed away, so I'm going to feel that differently than she will. Now, she knew my mom, had a connection with my mom. She's also grieving, but I'm gonna hear it and process it differently than she will. Just like when her dad that passed away, I'm grieving as well, but she's also going to need a little more time and space. But unfortunately, it's hard for me to be able to be there with her, walking through those things, without having attention being given somewhere else.
And that's really hard because, whenever this episode actually, I can't even think of the word right now. Airs. Sorry, guys, I'm having a moment. Whenever it airs, within the last week, for us personally, Doug's mom has passed away and we've had a funeral. So we are coming off of this and sharing the news and sharing information. And a few years ago, 3 years ago, my dad died from complications from a car accident. And so our children and family have experienced the loss of 2 grandparents. And so that's been a topic of conversation that comes up at random times and to random people.
And yes, death is a part of this discussion, but also somebody having gone into the hospital. You know, whenever somebody
Yes.
goes into the hospital, Tyler just automatically assumes they're dying.
Yeah. Every time. Are they
It's
going to
like,
die?
They had a broken arm. They're in the hospital. Are they going to die? No, they just had a broken arm. You know, like
right,
he just
right.
wants to set his limits. Like, how far are we going with this? Are we going all the way to death? Or,
But again, it's his perspective. So like if that's what happened to a previous
his
person in our
grandfather
lives,
went into the hospital
and didn't
after
come
his car
out.
crash and he died.
So
that's,
that's his train of thought. But yet it almost, we have to almost like laugh about it sometimes now because we're like, no, I mean, like I broke a toe last year. He's like, are you going to die? I'm like, well, I hope I'm not going to die from a broken toe. So, you have to.
And then sometimes like, is he disappointed? Like, I don't know. Is he looking forward to like
Right,
what's.
Right.
But so those types of things of saying, hey, I have to take mom to the hospital. She broke her toe. Well, in his mind, he's already gone to
Right.
what am I going to wear to the funeral kind of thing.
Right.
Or what toy am I going to take to the funeral?
Yes.
But, so it's also good when you're doing those types of things saying, look, we broke the toe. We got to go to the hospital. The doctor's going to fix the toe. And then we're going to come home tonight, kind of setting some of those expectations on things.
Right. And I know even with funerals, and if you've ever been through it, funerals are hard, no matter if you're neurotypical, neurodivergent, they're hard. People are sad. People have to dress a certain way. There's flowers, there's, music, you've got to sit still. There's a lot of moving parts. And again, we just experienced this in the last week. So a couple things, like Doug mentioned a minute ago, sometimes we have to divide and conquer. And that can be very, very hard. And honestly, sometimes I hate to say it, like maybe feeling some resentment. Like I really wanted Doug more when my dad passed away a few years ago. But what I needed most from him was to stay home with our children, run point on school logistics, and keep things as normal as possible, because we have one who just is unable to manage things like this, right? And then recently when this happened with your mom, I mean, you called me, I was at work, you left, I left work, and then I called my mom came up, and then we tried to keep things as normal as possible at home, because when Tyler is set off, it is awful for
And
everyone.
we don't know how long it's going to take to reset, sometimes.
Correct. So like in a perfect world, when you called me last week, I would have loved to have been able to leave and go with you right away and leave the kids. But we knew that was not what was best. But at the same time, I had to later that evening. So, when Doug got the call and then found out the news, after school, some things were different, like my mom's in town, and that was very odd. And, I was the one to pick up from school, and it was supposed to be Doug that day, and some different things. And so I waited till there was time to process it. And, I let Tyler know, listen, this is what happened, and grandma has died. And then his first question was, and we should be sad about that? And I said, yes, we should be sad about that, because he doesn't process emotions like you or I. He does recognize cognitively that when someone dies, it's sad. And so I explained to him, yes, that is sad. And he goes, well, I might cry. And I said, and if you need to cry and you need to make tears come out, you can. Now, did tears come out for him? And again, this is the language we have to use, because it has to be so literal. He didn't, but he did say later, he's like, I think I might have to. And I said, well, if you need to, you let me know. And so one thing we did, as much as he wanted to call his grandfather and call his uncles and call Doug, you at the time, I was like, let's not do that right now, quite honestly, because
people like me get it. Tyler calls, he's going to say something kind of blunt and that's
inappropriate.
That's comforting for, like there's a sense of like he's trying to comfort kind of thing.
Right.
But he does that to somebody that doesn't understand that. It's going to be like, well, what kind of idiot says something stupid like that to me at this time,
Right.
But most of my family knows him, and it probably would have been okay, but it's just one of those things of, you never know what he's going to say and how it's going to get interpreted.
Correct.
Especially even to like teachers at school
Right.
and different things of, but they kind of know at this point, like if something sounds really weird and off, we should probably call Doug and Janan and
they do.
What happened here? And they're like,
Right.
okay, we were trying to figure out what was going on with that.
And one thing too is like, I know for me, Doug, I try to be very respectful and, honor people while they're going through that. So like, it wasn't abnormal for your dad to Tyler to call your dad on a daily basis just to say what was going on. But I knew that him calling your dad that day was not good. Like that wasn't going to be helpful for your dad. So a little backup there, Doug's mom had dementia for a couple years. And the one way we kind of explained it, because he had seen grandma and different things, but I explained to him that her mind was sick. And for whatever reason, he could understand that her mind was sick and her brain was not working well. So he knew she was sick, even though she might have looked the same, but she started to act differently.
Yeah. So those kind of things can get challenging. And even like day of funeral, you know, funny story, the very first funeral I ever did when I worked for hospice,
You were like, what, 22,
23. We might not even been married
We
then.
were newly married.
And the funeral was for, you know, one of our hospice patients who had a grandson that had autism. Go figure. God was kind of prepping some things for me from back when. And they asked me to do the funeral because the kid liked me, and apparently, you know, never liked anybody. So we're sitting in the funeral, my very first funeral. I'm as nervous as I could be, and I get up to do my thing, and this kid just starts calling my name out, Doug. And I'm like, wait, they didn't talk about this when I was.
You didn't get trained in
this.
This
was not in Bible college.
Funeral 101.
As to what to do. And so I'm like, whatever the kid's name was, like, do you need to say something? And they're like, no. I'm like, okay. And so I'd go on another sentence or two, and he'd scream my name out again. And I'm like, do you have something to say? It's like, no. And I'm like, I looked at the family. I said, should I just keep going? They're like, yeah, just keep going. You know, so, you know, doing my first funeral, you know, people that don't really know all that well, kids calling my name every 3 sentences.
And you're distracted.
You know, I don't know what I said at that funeral, but, you know, it got done.
There's so much irony here. Like when we said that the other day, I was like, man, there's a lot going on.
God was prepping me for things that I didn't even know about at that point.
Well, and so in preparation for last week's funeral, you know, again, Doug's out of town trying to take care of business. And Doug, you actually ended up being asked to, do you say officiate?
Yeah,
yes, a funeral.
Let's call it that.
I don't know what the right word is. And so, you know, keeping in mind that, okay, I've got to take the kids out of town, and Doug's now speaking, as are Tyler and Tucker's uncles. And, you know, so trying to think, how am I going to keep things at bay? You know, and honestly, you never know how someone's going to react. Quite honestly, seeing a casket, seeing a body. I mean, Doug, you did this for a long time professionally, and you've seen everything under the sun. And
I'm no longer surprised.
So one thing we did is, you know, Doug and Tucker went the night before the funeral. And I just knew it was best for me to stay home with Tyler because, first of all, he doesn't usually sleep well other places when we go out of town because he's excited or jacked up and it's late at night and, you know, he can't come down off of that. So Doug and Tucker went early the night before so Doug could kind of gather his thoughts, help get, you know, family taken care of. And then my mom and Tyler and I drove up very early the morning of the funeral. We stopped at some Buc-ee's on the way. You know, we did our normal things, and we came in later than the rest of the family did in the family time. And, you know, I feel like I think I'm coaching Tyler all the time, like in the car. Here's, Tyler, what should you say if someone says this? Okay, Tyler, these people are going to be sad. We are sad. This is not an appropriate time to ask X, Y, and Z. So it's kind of like prepping him ahead of time, and you really never know what's going to happen. And I kind of had an exit strategy that if we sat down in the funeral, you know, I needed to sit on the end. So I had texted, you know, Doug and his brothers, and his older brother was kind enough to like reserve seats for Tyler and me, let me know where the exits were so that if I needed to get him out of there in case he was upset or distracting others, we had a plan. I also had, you know, Doug, your best friend, was in town. I happened to tell him, hey, listen, if you see me leave, I might need a little bit of help outside.
Yeah, we had 2 or 3 bouncers ready to go.
We did.
To help out on that.
We did. And honestly, he did a phenomenal job. Truthfully, the day of the funeral, Doug, I think that's probably one of the best days he's had behaviorally. Which is amazing.
But at the same time, recognizing he's also dealing with emotions at that point.
Correct.
And he doesn't really know how to process them. And he will continue to deal with these same emotions for months to years, even to, you know, even that funeral that we were at brought up conversations of his grandfather because that was the last funeral he went to.
Correct.
And and that's a very common thing for people that are not on the spectrum. You go to a funeral, and that might be the first time you really cried over your dad or your mom or your grandpa or whoever's funeral that was 2 or 3 funerals ago. Just something, you know, something snapped and hit at that point.
Right.
And poof, you know, it just stirred it all up inside of you. So
Right.
that's not uncommon for anyone, but especially for him, because he's going to take some time to process what this looks like. What does it mean, especially as
Right.
he gets into visits to go see my parents and my mom's not there. What's that
Right.
going to look
Right.
like?
She doesn't have her birthday, but he's going to tell me when her birthday is. And so,
And there again, that's common
Yeah.
for anyone,
Yeah.
whether you're on the spectrum or not. That year first is a really challenging time for anybody that's going through grief and loss, but especially for those on the spectrum because it's so
Right.
concrete and it can be very abrupt. Like, oh, grandma's not going to be at Christmas because she's dead. Like, well, there you go. Yes, buddy. That's probably not
and
how it's
that's
going to go.
it's really hard too, because me having dealt with my dad's grief years ago, there are just some times where it's like, well, I know he's not trying to be hurtful, but man, that's hard. I'm dealing with my own junk, and you too, Doug. Like, your mom died, and then he's asking these questions, and I know it's not on purpose, but it's still really hard. And I know, when you came back after going up, out of town initially, and then coming back before the funeral, like, you took time off from work, and I just said, you need to go do whatever you need to do. So, if you've ever experienced loss, you're very tired, you're drained, you're processing things. And that person who it's really impacting really needs that time away. And so again, if you are having a family member with some special needs, how can you best support the ones that are going through it? I hate to say it, but like the most, right? And also taking care of the other family members who are dealing with it. Doug, you still, you and your family were dealing with this loss. We have another child who is dealing with this loss, who's more of our quiet one, internal one. But, there's a lot of moving parts.
Yeah, I have a mode that's incredibly unhealthy that I've just and had to have it out of necessity where I go into professional caregiver mode. And so somehow I have a way of stuffing all of my emotions down in this really strong box. And I can be present during the tragedy and during the phases of whatever it needs to go through. And that gives me the opportunity to be helpful in serving the family members and the others around me.
Right.
The problem is I don't always deal with my grief up front or even down the road all that terribly well.
Yeah.
And, I remember when Janan's dad died, our younger son was like, Dad, I'm trying to be strong and not cry like you. And I'm like, Dad, that's like, buddy, there's something wrong with me. Like, this is not healthy. Like, you need to be sad and cry. Like,
Right.
just the fact that I'm not doing it is not a strength for me. That's just, a necessity in order to be able to function. It's a
Right.
survival skill for me.
But I
kind of
also
thing.
think in some ways it's also a skill set. There are some people, like, I couldn't have done the type of work that you did because I would have been like totally like,
you have to learn. You have to adapt to it.
and you had
learn from
to learn that skill. You had to adjust that skill. And that doesn't mean that I don't grieve, but I think it looks differently for each person. I know even in the last week, and I was just checking on the hair. Are you okay? Are you sure you're okay? It's okay not to be okay. And again, everyone processes things differently depending on whatever the news is that they get. What else?
Difficult subject. I think our kids are probably not going to let us talk much more on this before they, spontaneously combust from their attempt to be quiet. But reach out to us if there are questions or concerns that you have, or you're going through this.
Right.
There's no cookie cutter answers.
No.
Grief is going to have its day one way or another, and you can either give it time in order to be able to, in space with which to be able to happen in a healthy way, or you can try to stuff it down and pretend like it's not there, and then it's going to blow up in your face at just the wrong time.
Sure.
So get some help, work through some things. I will just kind of in summary, you got to process it, help them process through things, but you also got to process things for yourself.
Right.
And that tension point of being able to do that and the stress that can have on a
Yes,
relationship,
yes.
it's all very real things. So if you're going through stuff, reach out to us, let us know. We want to be able to help you and support you as best as we can, process through some things, get you connected with some additional resources.
Yeah.
But that's our very dark podcast for today. So thanks for hanging in there with us. Thanks for listening. If you have any questions or concerns, please let us know.
Right. Thanks.